On today's episode of Locked On Wilds, the Tampa Bay Lightning won their second straight Stanley Cup in 2020-2021. What can we learn from how they got up to the top of the mountain?
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. With the playoffs in the rearview mirror, the NFL and the NHL and NBA all getting set to return, the sports just aren't sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Isha Jerome of the Soda Pod joins us as we take a look at the two-peat, the Tampa Bay Lightning winning their second straight Stanley Cup trophy. We'll take a look at how they got there and some lessons the Minnesota Wild can learn from their championship. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, credentialed Wild media member. And as mentioned, it is Friday once again, which means it's time for Isha Jerome's weekly appearance here on Locked On Wild. And Isha, we are in the middle of August already, which means that NFL is coming back soon. We've got the State Fair coming up here before too long. Dare I say fall is on the way? I know I'm going to get some boos and hisses for saying that, but
well, is it a good thing that we're halfway through August because all of our favorite sports are coming back, or is it a sad thing because summer's coming to an end? That's once you hit around August 15th, it's like I'm kind of torn. I'm like, well, hockey's just around the corner, State Fair's coming up, but like the temperature dropped from 80 to 60 now. Like I don't know how to feel. I'm
torn because I love getting an opportunity in the summer to get out on the lake, get out on the golf course, all those types of things. And so you look now, we're less than 2 months away from the start of the season for the Minnesota Wild, which on one hand is like, okay, wow, it's already here. But on the other hand, at this point in the year, we're like, come on. But
let's be honest, no one cares about the Vikings now that their new quarterback is out, so who cares? Just watch the CFL, guys. Shout out to BC Lions. Let's go, baby.
And
we just got our quarterback back. Let's go. He was like the fourth string on I want to say the Detroit Lions. He wasn't going to have any playing time, so Ryan O'Rourke coming back to BC. Let's go.
There you go. If you want to hear more about how the Vikings are going to overcome the loss of J.J. McCarthy, Luke Braun at Locked On Vikings has you covered every single day.
Well, it's like less about how the Vikings were going to like prepare without him, because let's be honest, he wasn't going to get too many games. It just really sucks for his development, right?
Yeah,
like
it's deflating. It's deflating is what it is. So Luke Braun's got you covered. Make sure to check out him and all the other wonderful Locked On shows here in the state of Minnesota.
Locked On needs to start CFL. Just saying.
Double I emoji. Stay tuned.
Sorry, I literally said Ryan O'Rourke, thinking this is Minnesota Wild. Nathan O'Rourke of the BC Lions.
You did the 6 degrees of separation, Ryan O'Reilly and Ryan O'Rourke, and you combined the two of them into one.
I know.
Former Minnesota Wild legend, Ryan O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Legend.
Because I literally have just a bunch of hockey stats in front of me. And I'm getting mixed up with the Ryans. I'm getting mixed up with the Rourkes, with the O'Rourkes.
It's bound to happen.
There's just so much sports. Funny enough, despite it being August 15th, like there's just so much sports going on in my life right now with like balancing mixed martial arts, doing, prepping multiple hockey shows. the CFL season's going on right now. And for all you Americans listening and laughing at me, like, look, I'm Canadian, okay? I don't watch much NFL. As much as I am now a resident Vikings fan, the BC Lions are always going to hold a special place in my heart.
That's the one that always is like the closest to home. That's the one that you go with.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the 2020-2021 Tampa Bay Lightning. So what I've been doing this week, Isha, as you know, is going back and looking at the last few Stanley Cup champions. We're just trying to see if we can discern any sort of noticeable patterns. And there are the obvious things that pop up with every single Stanley Cup winner, or most of them at least.
First round draft picks that hit.
You got to have the first round draft picks that hit. You got to have the strong top six. You got to be really good. You can't have a glaring weakness. All those
top centers.
Also that. You got to have all these ingredients to be able to get you to the Stanley Cup final at minimum, let alone win it. But we have found some things that kind of separate these teams that do end up being the champions at the end of the season. And so the 56-game 2020-2021 season was no exception. I mean, things are pretty tight. Like, you look at that year, Vegas had the most points, tied with Colorado at 82. Tampa Bay Lightning finished tied with the Minnesota Wild with 75 points. And so they were in postseason position. I think they finished third in the Central Division, which is a bizarre statement to make.
COVID year, though, right? This was the year where the league was halted after 56 games.
Geographic. They tried to put everybody in the same general area to cut down travel time. You know, so the Wild were in the West, which was weird. All those 9:30 starts.
All the teams in Canada were in the North Division.
Yeah. So Tampa Bay.
Oh, yeah, right. This was my mistake. This wasn't the year it was halted. This was the year after.
Yeah,
it was halted.
This was the year they came back and said, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put everybody in quadrants.
Because the year was halted, they came back later in the year, and that's when the Canucks and Wild had their summer series. Whereas the Canucks didn't even make the playoffs this one.
Yeah.
And funny enough, the Canadians made the finals. But
this was the year weird. That the Minnesota Wilds played Vegas.
Yeah.
And Jonas Brodin got hurt in Game 7, and the Wild ended up losing to Marc-Andre Fleury. And it was a great series back and forth. It
really was, to be honest. Like it had me believing at times.
Yeah. Just could not overcome the Brodin injury. So
it's weird, Seth, though, because when we talk about like those COVID years, it kind of just meshes together. And that's why I got confused. I was like, was this the year it was halted? And it was because of the schedule too, right? Because it stopped in the just before spring, and then started again at the end of the summer, early fall, and then came back again, but a month later. So it just threw everything off. And then as a result, it was a 56-game season.
Yeah.
It was weird, man. Weird times, bro.
Yes, they were.
I'm glad things are back to normal.
We got the full 82 at least.
Yeah.
To say the least. So you look at that season, and as mentioned, Tampa Bay, they had 75 points. As far as goals scored go, they were 8th in the league with 180 in the 56 games. So 8th out of 10, 8th in the league there. Goals against the Tampa Bay Lightning were 6th with 145 against. So they're top 10 in both of those categories. Power play, the Lightning were 9th at 22.2%. Penalty kill, they were 4th. So check that box right there. Tampa Bay Lightning in the top 10 in offense, defense, and special teams.
Well, and if Kucherov played the season, they would have probably bumped up a spot or two, right?
Oh, for sure. Because as you mentioned, that was one notable at least for the regular season, that was one notable position that the Lightning just didn't have for the whole season. And so then you get into the long-term injured reserve, which we talked about with Vegas.
He pulled the old Patrick Kane,
and he comes back for the postseason and just goes
and
nuts.
Torches.
Yeah, just
32 points in 23 games in the postseason.
Insane.
Although he only put up 8 goals.
Yeah,
but
he was
24 assists in 23 games. Like, oh my goodness.
He just kept setting up Braden Point and Steven Stamkos.
Yeah. Yep.
So, you look at the things that I really liked about this Tampa Bay Lightning team. Just the names, like, because this was the Tampa Bay Lightning at the height of their power. Like, they had just won the Stanley Cup the season before, and even though they didn't win it, they did go to a third straight. They just got beaten by the Colorado Avalanche. So this was peak Tampa Bay Lightning. Braden Point,
peak dynasty team. Yep.
Andre Palat, Victor Hedman, Yanni Gourde, Steven Stamkos, Alex Killorn, Blake Coleman. Those are, with the exception of Victor Hedman, those guys were all in double digits in goals. You've got Pat Maroon on this team. You've got Ryan McDonough. A lot of guys.
Matthew Joseph, I believe, was a rookie that year. If not, he was in his one of his first 3 seasons, and he had 14 goals on the season as well.
They just had a bunch of guys that were able to
third year for Matthew Joseph, dude, and he was in that's wow.
So just to kind of tee it up, like, you're looking at a Tampa Bay Lightning team that has already done all the heavy lifting. They've built, they've developed, they've added the talent. And so at this point, it's just about executing the formula and continuing to build off of what they've done over the last few years. And so we're going to dive more into that as we continue the show today. But, if we look for some of these metrics to check off for this Lightning team, they were consistent in all of the areas you need to be. Offense, defense, special teams, they're in the top 10. And when we come back, we'll look at, how the lineup slotted in, and most importantly, how they were able to really tighten things down between the pipes. That is coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, you know me. I would say more than a little bit of an enthusiastic sports fan. And so in the fall especially, sitting on the couch on Saturdays watching college football all day. Sunday, same thing. Not a lot of movement on weekends once all the sports come back. And to get us through this quiet period in the sports calendar, FanDuel can help. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood to do so. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out the Locked On NHL podcast for your second listen today, so you don't miss out on any of the content covering either the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference, power rankings, or at-large NHL coverage throughout the week as well. Locked On NHL is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure as well to check out everything going on at the Soda Pod. Isha, you and Hoppy and Spoke Z and Joe Smith and the entire crew continuing to crush out content here even during the off season. Fellowship of the Rink, Judd's Buds, and just at-large Soda Pod episodes, including my appearances on Monday. If you haven't already subscribed, although the best part about this is I think our listener bases overlap quite a bit. And so there are people here listening to this who also listen to everything going on at the Soda Pod, and that's exactly what you want.
Yeah, we've been humming with the content. We just wrapped up our full Minnesota Wild prospect rankings, which will have more. Basically, we recorded like 4 to 5 hours worth of like a recording for that. So we divided it up in parts, and we're posting those full episodes. Actually, Wednesday this week, just so last Wednesday, we released 16 through 20 of our Minnesota Wild prospect rankings. The YouTube video just went up as well on the Soda Pod. Daily uploads, clips from our podcast, full segments from all the podcasts on the network. And yeah, we got a lot coming this season. So yeah, if you want more Wild content, check it out.
Excellent.
And also, if you want, because I know we're still slow with sports, if you want some good underdog picks for UFC 305, Kaikar France right now, by the way, UFC 305 tomorrow on Saturday, Kaikar France plus 190. He's been out for a year, but I'm saying on FanDuel, those are pretty good odds. Just saying.
There you go. I like the insider tease there. Appreciate that. Isha, I want to talk because I know you mentioned this as one of the things that you really liked most about this Tampa Bay Lightning team. Let's talk about their defense. And yes, it was a Lightning defense that just like, I remember, because this was, this is exciting for me because this was about the time that I really like firmly got into hockey, was after the bubble, like the bubble resumption. Now this next season, like that was okay, we're full bore. And so I remember these names like vividly. You've got Victor Hedman, you've got Mikhail Sergachev, you've got Eric Cernak, Ryan McDonough, Jan Ruda, Luke Shen, like.
Well, and David Savard too, who's an awesome veteran as well, right? Who played Montreal, Columbus Blue Jackets, and though he put up points elsewhere, like that wasn't his role with the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's not what was expected of him. And to be honest, like he wasn't scoring a bunch of goals. He was getting a bunch of secondary assists. He was always a very good defensive defenseman. So that was an awesome acquisition for them. And you got veterans like you said there, Luke Shen, who's been there, done that, former top draft pick, who never necessarily lived up to maybe where he was selected, but who's good. Obviously won a cup with the team here with the Tampa Bay Lightning and has been a good commodity elsewhere. I mean, he's one of the players that Quinn Hughes for the Vancouver Canucks says helped him in his development, as he was able to stay home, stay home in his zone and allow Quinn Hughes to go do what he did. Obviously, Victor Hedman, an absolute stud, one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League. I argue like one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League for the last decade. And then young guys as well in Mikhail Sergachev, Cal Foote. So like, and Ryan McDonough too, another guy, been there, done that guy, former captain for the New York Rangers and veteran as well. So like they had such a stacked and defensive heavy defense who also had young guys who could skate, and it was so well balanced. Like their third pairing was a lot of teams, second or even, first pairing. So yeah, their defense was outstanding.
And I talked about this with Florida is, having, I'm glad you brought that point up because that's a common theme that I've seen is, you talk about these guys, well, if you put them on another team, they'd be like a second pairing. Like and it's not easy to do, but that's the quality depth that you need to have is those guys who can play higher in the lineup, but for your team, you're putting them in a specific role and they do the job, no problem.
Yeah, like David Savard played 20 games. I don't care if he just got 5 assists. He's a defenseman.
Yeah.
He's not like, yeah, if you get points, that's obviously a bonus, but especially when you get a guy who's more of a defensive defenseman, right? A guy who you expect to play defense in his own zone versus be a puck mover and set up the plays. That's what you want, man. That's what you want. And there was the same with Luke Shen. I know Luke Shen didn't play as many games. He got hurt, but still, like he had a valuable role throughout the season. And then you have like the guys like Sergachev, whose role is to be more of the offensive guy, more of the puck moving kind of guy. And Ryan McDonagh, the same thing. He played 23 games, only 8 points. But at that point, Ryan McDonagh's not expected to be the setup guy like he was, more so anyways, with the Rangers prior to this. So like, I just thought that their defense was beautifully constructed. And I mean, Hedman was playing hurt. I mean, Hedman, I feel like is always playing hurt every playoff year. And it's insane how good he can play hurt, right?
Yeah.
And oh man, he's a monster. Like he's one of my favorites to do it in this modern era for sure.
And then, you know, some of these other guys, like Tyler Johnson was on this Lightning team at 30. You've got Pat Maroon, and those guys, you know, that's part of the puzzle for this Tampa Bay Lightning team, is that, yes, they do have those top end guys that are going to do a ton of the heavy lifting, but all those guys down to the end of the lineup, they all played their role. Like if you look at the postseason scoring, you expect Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point and Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman. You expect like Kucherov, Point, and Stamkos. You expect those guys to be leading the in the scoring department. But then you get a guy like Alex Killorn who steps up and gives you 8 goals that postseason.
17 points.
Yeah. Andre Palat, Anthony Cirelli. Like,
well, Palat was second in scoring on the season.
Does their thing.
Palat was second in scoring on the season as well, which, like, again, you talk about Tyler Johnson, undrafted guy. You talk about Andre Palat, 7th rounder, right? You talk about, you know, Killorn. He wasn't a top draft pick either, right? Like, that's another thing that this Tampa Bay Lightning did so well. They drafted and developed guys who weren't necessarily in the top rounds. So when everyone, you know, and there's not many, but there are a few who are critical of the Minnesota Wild's draft picks, bro, like there are some late picks that Judd Brackett and Billy Guerin have identified as really talented guys that very well could hit and be key guys down the road, right? So, yeah, I know the first 2 rounds matter the most, but identifying talent in the later rounds could help you win a Stanley Cup. I mean, look at Palat, dude. He's one of the best examples.
Yeah, draft and develop. You know, you see it a lot in pretty much every Stanley Cup, is there are at least a few guys that have come up through the system. You've got to be able to take draft picks and turn them into key players. And so that's a huge part of the equation. The other part of the equation that really has been a fun player to watch, and this is where we'll tie into the Minnesota Wild a little bit, having a good goalie between the pipes that just can be like, don't worry, guys, I got this one.
Yeah, like, lucky for the Tampa Bay Lightning that they have arguably the best goalie in the league. So
yeah, so we'll
struck gold with him.
We'll talk about AndreVasilevskiy. We'll talk about Jesper Wallstedt, and we'll put a bow on this one as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild, taking a deep dive into what the Minnesota Wild can learn from the Tampa Bay Lightning. More to close it out after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure, if you have not already, to send a photo of proof that you have subscribed to Locked On Wild with your name to lockedonwild@gmail.com, and you'll be entered into the Locked On Wild sweepstakes, giving away 2 tickets to see the Wild take on Columbus on opening night. Dino back in the building. So you have the opportunity to be part of the fun. We'll draw the winner in early October as we try to get Locked On Wild up to 3K on YouTube. Full contest details can be found in the description of this episode.
We're trying to get him on Fellowship of the Rink prior to that game.
Oh,
it should be fun.
That would be exquisite.
Yeah.
Dino's always he's a great interview. I can't say that from personal experience, but from everything that I've seen, that would be a lot of fun.
We're also trying to get Creed Bratton to be the guy that interviews him on our behalf. That's been harder to set up, to be honest. It's been easier to go through Columbus media. It's been tougher to get through Creed Bratton's agent.
Oh my gosh.
But imagine how funny that would be if it's like, instead of Joe Smith and Hoppy, it's just like a mirror,
That'd be the bit of the year. Like that would be the bit of the year amongst Minnesota Wild podcasts.
He does do podcasts. He was on the Office Ladies podcast a couple times, but they were coworkers of his. So.
Yeah,
we're trying. We're trying.
They had an in. They had a little bit of an in for that one, but well, keep me posted. Double eyeball emojis again.
There we go.
Let's finish because, one of the big pieces to this Tampa Bay Lightning puzzle that allowed them to repeat as champions and get 2-3 straight, AndreVasilevskiy, who quickly became one of the best goalies in the NHL. He still is. His performance over the last couple of seasons has been more marked by injuries than it has been by, poor performance. But his run over those cup years for Tampa Bay, legendary. This 2020-2021 season, he started all 23 games in the postseason for the Lightning. He went 16-7, a 1.9 goals against average, and a .937 save percentage. He had a quality start, which is 20 or fewer shots against. 70% of the time. Like in the postseason, 5 shutouts in one single postseason is just, it's insane. And
he's only missed the playoff once in his entire career.
It's not the rule. It does help to have good goaltending to be able to shut down an opposing offense or to, make key saves down the stretch in tense games. As we talked about on yesterday's show with looking at the Colorado Avalanche and their Stanley Cup championship, I mean, they did it with Darcy Kemper. So I can't make the point that it's like essential to have really good goaltending, but it definitely factors in. And as good as Vasilevskiy has been, this is where the optimism and the hope for Minnesota Wild fans comes in down the road, is that Jesper Wallstedt can be that guy. Maybe not going to be Hall of Fame caliber AndreVasilevskiy. We don't know. But he can be the guy that says, okay, we're down 2-1 in a series, and we need our goalie to get one. We need our goalie to go take a game for us and get us back into this series. Or our backs are against the wall, 3-0. Yeah. We need to win this 4th game. That is a huge part of the puzzle too. Oh,
for sure. A goalie who you can trust to not be leaking goals and just be solid, and maybe give up ones where you didn't really expect him to save anyways, but also surprise you making those saves is what makes a goalie great. What was just so perfect for the Tampa Bay Lightning was he developed 3 years behind Ben Bishop and then 1 year in front of Ben Bishop. Whereas Ben Bishop was a bona fide top goalie in the National Hockey League who was carrying the Tampa Bay Lightning to multiple playoff series, prior to Vasilevskiy ever suiting up for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So when he came into the league at 20 years of age, 16 games, 24 games behind Ben Bishop, like unbelievable. And then when he took the reins, that was the year that they didn't make the playoffs, but Ben Bishop played 32 games behind him, right? And then he kind of just took over as their top guy. Like, what a tremendous player to develop behind, right?
Oh, yeah.
Then, the American stud that was Ben Bishop as well. So, like, I will say it's tough to really model like a team and kind of a goalie's development after just kind of a perfect storm from a first round pick, much like Wallstedt is. But like he doesn't have a Ben Bishop and to develop behind. Now,
yeah,
hopefully the goaltender who he is playing with, and that's still for the next, at least 2 to 3 years in his first 2 to 3 years in the National Hockey League. And again, that's whether that is Gustafsson, and Gustafsson does take a step to be okay, like either split time with him next season or as like the 1A, 1B, however it turns out to be. Let's hope that he is like good enough doesn't do it justice. Let's hope that he is great and can be like a top goalie, a 1A or a 1B. Then that's an awesome tandem. And it's like, okay, then you can draw similarities. But it is tough to be like, well, you had a top goalie in Ben Bishop to develop behind. And what a 1-2 punch that was, especially in some of the early playoff runs. But them both being first round picks does show that like there is that talent comparison there. And there is that comparison that they're both going to be in the NHL in their early 20s, where we've seen a lot of goaltenders not even get that call up to a full-time NHL role or even a part-time NHL role before 25, which is something that we can draw from similarities, because though Wallstedt is probably not going to be there this year, and that's no fault of his. That's just, the way the Wild
that's the way things are at. Yeah.
Marc-Andre Fleury's coming back for one more year, right? If he wasn't coming back for one more year, Wallstedt would have been the backup to start and maybe play himself into a starter role.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen this year. And I don't think Wild fans should be upset about that. It's fine. Like, one more year development is okay. He's going to get some better selected call-up games this year, not panic call-up games where they throw him to the Wolves, and I think that's totally fine. And Seth and I have talked about this on both the Soda Pod and this podcast before. Hopefully, the Iowa Wild really make sure that he gets the starts for the best AHL teams, and then, throw the backup goaltender to maybe some of the quote unquote easier teams. So just that way they can really maximize his development. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't think of. Like, make sure that the AHL teams that he's getting the start against are the best AHL teams, because that's gonna, why not? You want him to develop, and better that than give him to the best NHL teams when he comes up and goes, oh, this is too much.
Well, and that's where you go from seeing what happened against Dallas, where his first NHL start was just a mess. Not necessarily his doing either. Like, it was the team in front of him played terribly too. So that was just like you said, panic start is that's exactly what that was, because both guys were hurt,
injuries,
and there just was nothing you could do about that.
Yeah,
so.
But that's the thing. I just want to like reiterate that, like, no fan should be like upset that he's not the 1B this year. Like, it is what it is, bringing Fleury back, and that's fine. One more good year of development is okay. With Vasilevskiy, like, because they had Bishop as their bona fide number one, not this, Gustafsson and Fleury's last year. So like, he's still going to be playing, and he played good last year. So like, we're going to have this tandem this year. Like, that's fine. That's not something that we should be rolling our eyes or banging our heads against our desks over. Like, we have a good goalie tandem this year. Let's not complain about that. Fleury's going to retire next year, and okay, then this kid's going to get the opportunity. Yeah. Rushing goalies is never the answer.
Well, and I don't want it to come, because I don't want the conversation to turn into, well, we have to get him a spot, so now we got to trade Gustafsson. Like that doesn't make sense.
No.
So
no, it doesn't make sense at all, especially when, like, again, Fleury's retiring next year. If you trade Gustafsson, then you have one young goalie.
Then you're basically
you haven't even seen enough of a sample size yet to determine if he can handle an NHL load.
Yeah.
And then you have to go make a trade, or you have to go make a signing that, again, I would rather have Gustafsson because you know what. Well, and shoot, we've seen his ceiling, we've seen his floor. His floor honestly wasn't as bad as people make his floor out to be. Let's be honest. Last year was bad all around. Like the fact that you have Gustafsson now is fine, and you're not paying him too much, so that's good. And even if he plays really good this year, he's not going to ask for the sun, moon, and stars. So like, I feel like the situation between the pipes is actually a really good situation right now. Does it resemble that of, again, back to the Tampa Bay Lightning Vasilevskiy situation? No, but that's just because they had a top guy who they were playing a lot. Like Ben Bishop was playing the majority of the seasons, right? And then it's like, okay, that's perfect. That's ideal. We can kind of slowly bring Vasilevskiy in, and that's what happened. 16 games his first year, 24 games, then took over the reins with 50-32 split, which, shoot, if we see that from a Jesper Wallstedt, that would be ideal, assuming that Gustafsson is playing to a level of, close to what, Ben Bishop was as far as being reliable, not necessarily like the same player.
And we end up in good territory if Gustafsson gets back to, maybe not what he was 2 seasons ago.
I think it's possible though.
I think so too. Like,
because it wasn't like world beater. It was, you were a good goaltender.
He was just playing exceptionally well. It's just that the league kind of, the league gets those tells on players, and they develop tendencies of like, here's where we're going to consistently attack. If you're not ready for that, then you see what happens where you just have the uneven, like, good start here, not great start here. He had like 5 different stretches where he would put like 3 or 4 good starts together, and then all of a sudden 3 or 4 bad ones. It's like,
and it doesn't help that the Wild were just a bad team last year.
Correct.
Like that weighs a lot on the goaltenders when you have pretty much Brock Faber carrying on defense. You don't have that. You don't have Spurgeon, who's such a good systems guy as well. And I'm not like poo-pooing the other guys, but Brodin was inconsistent, right? Like
Middleton just was not the same guy without Spurgeon.
Exactly. And again, like, I'm not like trying to bash him either, but like he's not the guy that's gonna carry and make it easier on the goaltender, right? Like, so like, again, like, I don't blame Gustafsson for last year. Could he have played better in stretches? Absolutely. But like, Fleury was able to play a little bit better throughout stretches because he's been there, done that, right? Like he's played seasons where defenses have fallen apart in front of him, and just having that little bit more of just being a little bit more veteran savvy, it was less in his head, right? Whereas I think Gustafsson just got way too much hate last year. And I think the blame should have been just on the Wild season. Again, not necessarily just on like single players, just on like, look, the season wasn't good because of because of the injuries and because the defense fell apart. Like just roster wise, the defense fell apart. If anything, blame Merrill. Right? Like when you had to lean on Merrill and Goligoski so much, like, they're the ones who are burning Gustafsson more than anybody.
And so this is the takeaway. This is the takeaway from this episode, is that when you're forced into like, we're not really comfortable with you here, but we don't have a choice, and so we're going to elevate you into this part of the lineup, that's when you get hurt. Teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning, they say, you could probably be a second pairing defenseman on a different team. We're going to play you as a third line guy.
Yeah.
Like that's what you need as a contender, in addition to, all the other pieces. You need to have that quality depth to be able to overcome injuries and not miss a beat. Like, when
you got David Savard in your third pairing, not a John Merrill, like, that's why you're winning Stanley Cups.
If you get derailed, if your run to the Stanley Cup gets derailed by one injury, you're not a contender. Like, you can't have one injury where you're like, I don't know what we're gonna do.
Or even two, Seth. Like, if you lose Spurgeon, Brodin, and everything falls apart, it's like, well, you clearly don't have the depth to go far in the playoffs, or let alone the season to get there.
Yep. This is why I'm glad we have these conversations, because we get to exactly where I was hoping we'd get to.
Look at that. We went full 360 as well. We went right back to the theme of the show.
Full gambit. And that's what you can come to expect when Isha joins the show every Friday here on Locked On Wild. We'll do it again over on the Soda Pod on Monday. So you can catch my appearance over on the Soda Pod for Monday's show. And make sure to subscribe to Locked On Wild as well as the Soda Pod. Also, make sure to hit those notifications so you don't miss out on any new episodes anytime, especially during the off season. Locked On Wild has you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great weekend. We'll see you for the live show on Sunday at noon, and then for our next regular episode on Monday.